Welcome to this incredibly verdant community known as the multi-tree forest. An incredibly beautiful and tranquil spot. This is where trees of every description and multiple species, the gray birch, the red oak, the maple, the American beech, all live together in peace and harmony. And as we pursue our way through this incredible environment, I am in search of a forester. This is a type of entity that dedicates itself to the study and preservation of this beautiful deciduous forest, a place that serves as not only a place of incalculable beauty, but a place where many creatures find themselves living in peace and harmony. I continue my way deeper into this forest to seek my prey. As I wind my way through this amazing place and find myself in the direct shadow of a magnificent American beech tree, my carefully honed and developed skills as an observer of nature par excellence, I realize that I know, my instincts tell me that I'm getting close to people, and where there's people, one often finds a forester. Indeed, and here in repose lies a forester here in the forest, its natural habitat, and it appears to be sleeping, a magnificent specimen, well over $30,000 worth. And as I come around, I see characteristic markings that tell me, yes, this is a wilderness edition. Indeed, absolutely fascinating. But I must be careful not to wake it up, because when one wakes one up, you have no idea. Oh my God, it's awake! Blimey, I'm getting out of here. Oh, come on, Dickie attaboy. There's no need to fear the wilderness. This is a very interesting version of the venerable Subaru Forester, and you may also be aware that there's a Outback wagon version of the Wilderness trim line, and it's got all kinds of neat stuff on it, inside and out. From a styling standpoint, though, the biggest and most dramatic thing you'll notice right off the bat, which is actually a part of its new functionality, is it has a higher suspension. It's been raised a bit, so you get nearly 10 inches of ground clearance, which is quite a bit, actually. Very useful in the bush. And this particular Forester, also, I'm not sure, I have to check it, what color this is called, but it also blends in sort of a woodsy, wilderness, foresty environment. Not that you're going to sneak along because, well, it's a car, and cars make noise. But this one is
a very, very practical choice if you do need to do some off-roading. Not too heavy duty, it's not a boulder climber, but it is a very, very practical version of a nice roomy SUV that doesn't have excessive large dimensions compared with like your full-sizers. And I find it kind of intriguing. We'll go deeper. We'll find out exactly what's underneath, first of all, because it is a lot higher off the ground. If we look at the rear suspension back here, this is the meat and the potatoes of the racing operation. As far as the rear suspension is real interesting because it's got all kinds of things going on. It has like a multi-link setup. Then it has almost a McPherson strut type coilover shock arrangement. This kind of thing is very easy as far as adjusting the ride height when they're actually engineering things, because they can literally just lengthen the size of the shock mounts and everything else, and then adjust the geometry of the lower arm accordingly to make sure that the attitude and the ride geometry is correct as it's moving around. And you go around here and you see there's your rear differential. And here we are on the other side, a little bit better view actually. And you can see it looks pretty stout. It could take a fair bit of punishment, as well as deliver fully independent travel, which is not as good as a full live axle, but it can be very, very good, and it seems very good on this car from what I've experienced. And what the heck is this thing here? What's this? Ooh. Wow. If I didn't know better, I'd say that's your Monroney. Oh, hang on, we gotta have a look at this. And there she blows. This is your Monroney, named after either a senator or a congressman, of course, who decided that people ought to have the right to know what everything costs on their new car, and also displays other valuable information like the EPA rating and all that good stuff. And you can tell we have symmetrical all-wheel drive, which is a Subaru trademark, along with vehicle dynamic control, eyesight, driver assistance system with automatic emergency steering, blind spot detection with rear cross traffic alert, side curtain airbags. That's all the safety stuff. Performance-wise, we have a 2.5 liter horizontally opposed boxer engine, which puts out the amount of horsepower that's on the bottom of your screen now. I think it's like 250, 270, something like that. It also has dual X mode. With X mode is their off-road mode, and this one has hill descent and low speed control. And so all these things are very valuable to have in slippery conditions and especially off-road conditions. And the grand price, as you can see, is $35,795 with a generous assortment of options, including, I know it, it's your favorite option package 22, which is $1,850 and gives you your StarDrink multimedia navigation system, high resolution display, all that good stuff. So it's this particular unit is very well equipped. I think it pretty much has, having spent a few days with it already, it has everything on it that you'd want. I don't think there's a whole lot more to add to this, because it's got the goodies that you need, and the stuff you don't is not here. As you can see, the front end uses your standard McPherson strut suspension. And look at all this ground clearance. It's quite a bit, quite a bit. You also have a number of little shields here. Now these aren't, I would not take this over like a diamond that's the size of a small chair or anything like that. But for the type of, let's say, trail off-roading into a national forest or something like that, hence the name Forester, it'll do well. It'll do fine. It helps protect everything underneath here. And as with all these new shields, this is not as complete as an electric car, which I demonstrated in a prior video. However, it's good at keeping things aerodynamic, and it's also good at tucking things in very well and protecting everything during your off-road shenanigans. And they've done a nice job. It's a Subaru, man. They've been doing this stuff a long time. They kind of know what needs to be protected the most and what doesn't. So there you go. Thank you, Subaru.
In the clearing stands a Boxer. It's an attractive SUV. Well, if you like SUVs. But here we have our wonderful little vulnerable 2.5 liter Boxer engine. I actually go way back with the Boxers. I had a 1982 Subaru station wagon with four-wheel drive. It wasn't called the Outback yet. That had not occurred. And I'd never met Paul Hogan either, and neither had you. Until he became a worldwide phenomena. Very nice gentleman too. But here we have, it's a totally flat four-cylinder. And back in the day, in '82, my spare tire, used to ride right up here, sit right on top of the engine. And Subaru has always been very proud of the fact that they're, get this thing to operate properly, that their weight distribution is great because the Boxer engine has a very low profile and can be mounted flat and low. Porsche likes this design for a lot of the same reasons. But this one is also fairly easy to work on when it comes to oil change time, which I always love. Because your oil filter, right there. See? See? You can just get right there. You got it. 2.5 liters. The horsepower is, and the torque is, I'll put that on the bottom. I don't know it right off the bat. But it's a very smooth engine too, because the pistons rather, are going back and forth. This one's going down while this one's going up, and one's going up and that one's going down. So there's constant, what is known as perfect primary balance to a Boxer engine. And they don't really feel these days that much different from an inline four-cylinder engine because they've done so much with inline fours as far as keeping them well behaved. In terms of vibration and things like that, but it still works really well. And some of the foibles that they used to have in the past with Boxer engines have been addressed. They used to have, Subaru had a problem for a while with what kind of coolant you use, because if you use the wrong sort of coolant, it tended to eat away at the head gaskets, and then they'd subsequently leak, and all manner of hell would break loose. They've taken care of all that stuff years ago. So this is interesting too, and this is something that's becoming more and more common. Your intake runners here are all made out of a plastic or a high composite type of material. Now the main reason they do that instead of metal is it's very, very easy for them to produce very complex shapes, so when the air is entering the combustion chamber, it can swirl the way the engineers want it to swirl. And when they get it swirling properly, that generates the type of charge that makes it most efficient and generates the most power. If you go all the way back to Hemi engines, the hemispherical combustion chamber was kind of a version of this in that it helped to shape how the fuel-air mixture got into the cylinder. Well, now they can do a lot of that sort of thing using these advanced composites to make it like, if you think of a river with sand shoals in it and how the water comes across it and is steered beautifully by the sand. Well, it's kind of similar to that, except it's using an air-fuel mixture. And that's very useful in this day and age. One can also point out that it doesn't rust, and I don't know of any long-term reliability issues. Does this material deteriorate over time being exposed to so many heat cycles? I haven't heard that happening, and everybody's doing it. I mean, all the big companies are doing it with their engines now. And what's the other thing? It's lighter. And anytime you can save weight, that's a good thing. This is a Boxer, but it's not a fighter. Can you hear that? It's a very distinctive exhaust note that Subarus have. Now, the only other mainstream car you can go out and buy that has a flat 4 engine like this is, well, there aren't any, but there are flat 6s that Porsche has, and there is a similarity, but the Subaru, in my mind anyway, does really have its own distinctive exhaust note, and it's kind of changed. It makes a big difference between whether you have a manual transmission, which unfortunately is disappearing, even from Subarus, getting harder and harder to locate. It's somewhere in the product line. But conventional automatics sound a certain way as far as the way the engine changes its RPMs between shifts. Because with a continuously variable transmission like this linear-tronic Subaru transmission, there is no solid drop-off because it just changes ratio constantly. It's kind of a miracle in some ways, but it's also a very, very efficient way to transfer power from the engine to the wheels. Speaking of the wheels, I do have the X-Drive right here. It does have 2 different settings. Well, 3, to be honest. It's in normal right now, which is normally what you drive around in on the road. But you also have the snow and dirt mode, and you also have the deep snow and mud mode. And that changes all kinds of little parameters to how the power is delivered, and anti-spin systems, and all those wonderful black boxes that help you get, well, first of all, help keep you from getting stuck. But if you do get stuck, it can help get you out. The Subaru has been working on this stuff forever, and so they're kind of like Jeep in that they really are good at coming up with systems that work quite well. Now, I'm not saying the other manufacturers don't, because they've done their homework too, but in the case of these 2 companies that have really made their bread and butter on being able to drive on slick, nasty surfaces, mud, that kind of thing, anytime where your traction is not optimal, they've really developed some pretty good systems. The symmetrical all-wheel drive is what Subaru likes to call their all-wheel drive system, which is on every Subaru. And the main reason they call it that is the symmetry part I don't really understand completely, but what they like to point out is with the flat 4 engine, it has a lower center of gravity, and it is a flat. By its very architecture, you can mount it lower in the chassis, and it carries its weight lower, and then it goes straight into the transmission and then to all 4 wheels. So it's kind of it's an elegant balanced system when you look at it on paper about how they actually designed all this. And is it better than other systems? I don't know if it's necessarily better, but it's very good. And it does help keep the car in balance quite well. And there's all kinds of other advantages to it. What happens when if you should be so unfortunate as to be in a bad accident, when you have to crumple the front end, when you have a flat 4 engine mounted the way it is, as opposed to an inline, it absorbs the force differently. And Subarus do have an excellent crash rating as far as saving people's lives. I have a girl I know who was a nurse, and she had her baby with her in her Subaru Crosstrek, I believe it was. Anyway, she was on the highway, and I don't know what happened, but she rolled the car like 3 or 4 times. And she and her baby were unharmed. Also, kudos to the manufacturer of the seat, the baby seat. But the car held together really well, and they ran right out and bought another Subaru. A bigger one, though. Their family is growing, so they needed more space. But they have a very good reputation, and that's always a good selling point for any vehicle. The fact of the matter is, cars in general are so much safer than they used to be. And yet, in so many statistics, car accidents and fatalities are going up. And that's largely because of people being distracted and depending too much on some of these semi-autonomous systems that are not fully hatched as far as I'm concerned.
and the result is you get some really bad wrecks. That there's so many kinds of more minor accidents that if you have a seatbelt on, with the array of airbags you have, plus the crumple zones on the car, and everything they've learned about how to absorb energy as opposed to passing it directly into the passenger compartment. All these things make these cars so much safer, and yet people still find ways to wreck them to the point where they have serious injuries and termination of life. So the bottom line here is, I don't care how safe the car is and how many wonderful features it has. Pay attention, please. That's the number one thing you have that's going to help you from having an accident, is avoiding it. And how do you do that? Well, one of the best ways to avoid that is be a good, conscious driver. You're the biggest computer your car has.
And so, we must say now farewell to all our friends in the forest, and thank our forester for taking us there and back. Geist in alten Piri, gesandt